This video is about how God chose me, and it is morally, scientifically, socially, historically, religiously, spiritually incorrect and erroneous for them not to give me my rightful place without condition or demands. The difference between hand-to-hand combat and sports fighting has to do with traditions, has to do with culture, and even national history, as well as spiritual and mental characteristics of martial arts, which, in the truest sense of the word, define these arts. So when you saw the Zulu club, was it similar to the Narmer palette and the club he was using, or the mace he was using?
Yes.
All right, so when you look at the history of Buddhism, okay, and how it comes from India, the Hindus, and it was the Buddhists who created what many people consider the foundation of martial arts, which isn't the foundation, of Shaolin Kung Fu. Do you see a very obvious connection with the migration of martial arts, people, and philosophy from Africa to Asia?
Yes, I can see the similarities.
Now, China and India are the two most populated countries in the world. So, as such, they have an inordinate influence, if you slice it by country, over perspectives on martial arts. And perhaps there are more Chinese martial artists than people of other race, of any other nationality, rather.
Yes.
So, when you look at DNA tribes, the top three were South African, African Great Lakes, and West African, where my family's from, on my dad's side. So when you couple that with the club that you don't see depicted in other nations, and if you do, certainly not as commonly, and it's certainly not maintained culturally, do you see how this is an obvious connection to black migration to southern Egypt?
I can, yes, I can see the transferred.
When people consider martial arts, considering the history of martial arts being developed in Africa for the purpose of war with weapons, first and foremost, how ridiculous is it to not consider transferable skills, which include weapons, when one considers who's the top martial artist?
I think it's very ridiculous that they're not acknowledging it. I mean, it's so obvious. Historically, it's all logged and evidented there. I mean, I've just looked through it, and I found so much evidence. I mean, it's not even evidence, it's just history, it's actual facts.
All right, so let me, at this point, put it in a way that these people can understand, and they're forced to acknowledge that I'm correct. Their sports fighting is all bark and no bite. It reminds me of the Jungle Book and the boy who, in order to take on his arch nemesis, the antagonist, Scar, I believe his name was, the tiger, he had to acquire what he referred to as a tooth, which was actually a knife. Obviously, teeth bite, so to not include weapons is like being all bark and no bite.
Yes, no, that makes sense.
All right, so
I guess that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess they didn't show the knife because it was an animation and it was targeted towards children. But I think if somebody who understands the history behind it, they could actually make that correlation. That it's pretty clear. When you told me, it actually clicked.
Yes, it's part of why I explain this in many different ways because people are heavily conditioned by pseudoscientists and think tanks and political groups who have ulterior motives and want to deny the truth, especially religious traditions. And martial arts are part of the religious traditions that these people see as being from the old world or ancient, and that they are trying to eradicate to make way for their inferior immoral philosophies that have killed and sterilized countless people with eugenic activities and techniques. So I'm going to end this by giving you a list of names. And I want you to try to see what these people have in common. Narmer, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Hannibal, David from the Bible, David and Goliath, Attila the Hun, Shaka Zulu, Hitler, Moses, Mark Antony, Joshua, and Moses. I bring up the time when he killed the Egyptian, and a guy named Benaniah, who a lot of people don't know. He, I believe, killed basically a 7 foot tall Egyptian, or a real tall Egyptian, and he earned himself fame and a respectable position in society. So, what do all these people have in common except for perhaps Benaniah?
Well, military martial arts skills.
Yes, they were either military men or martial artists who were leaders, and many of them are considered some of the greatest leaders in history. So, to say that martial arts means nothing is tantamount to say that these people's military experience had nothing to do with their leadership abilities, or that these people training martial arts did not help them with their mental conditioning, their insight, and their leadership skills. This is absolutely atrocious. Now, I just want you to end with final thoughts. How do you feel when you think about how they are trying to deny me my rightful place with a nonsensical argument at the expense of countless people who are suffering, who might have been saved had I been given my rightful place?
I think for your viewers, they and anyone who's new to this, they really need to understand where you're coming from, because from somebody who's just like sort of this, initially I was really skeptic until I've done my own research and I've actually watched your videos. I've got to know you, and I've realised that everything you've said resonates much truth. I mean, it's it's really ridiculous how they make you suffer, but at the same time, you haven't allowed it to actually affect you, which is amazing. Exceptional men that are good at hand-to-hand combat are always great leaders and brilliant strategists.
Uh, strategists, you mean?
Strategists, that's it, yeah.
Who's that quote from?
I don't know, I somewhere and I thought of you.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of things come to mind. We look at Confucius. You know who Confucius was?
Yes.
He wasn't a martial artist because he didn't believe in belonging to a martial arts system, but he was a great military mind. And this is a recurring theme. I mean, even look at Muhammad, right? And a lot of the Islamic famous guys, they are considered by many as great military minds. So this is a very much a recurring theme. And I think that it is impossible for someone to be honest and not to see that society was civilized by martial artists. Look at the statues I showed you earlier, right? You could see that Horus was in a deliberate stance. He bended his knees were bent. He was in a stance that allowed for balance with his weapon. so he could strike more effectively. Did you see that?
Yes. And he looked like a man who was ready, always ready for combat.
Yes, and that's what he was. He was the avenger and the protector, the patron of Nekin. Kind of like being a patron saint in Catholicism. Someone there who's protecting, the protector of Nekin, the patrons of Nekin. And his weapon was a staff. There was the Wash scepter. There was the Heka scepter, I believe. It's been a while since I looked up these, the Heka staff, and there was these different staffs that had power. They weren't only used as weapons for war, but they also had magical powers associated with them. In fact, the first kind of magician staff were probably the scepters and staffs from Egypt. Certainly, they were in African kind of folklore and mythology before they were anywhere else. And you know how you have magicians wearing those magic hats like Merlin, and he has his staff. Well, Horus has his upper and lower Egypt crown, and there's other headdresses for Egyptian mythology and culture, and their staffs. And of course, the staff is one of the more famous martial arts weapons. And of course, a spear is a staff with a spearhead, more or less. You follow me?
Yes.
Horus is also depicted with a kind of ceremonial dagger that comes straight from the Nubians. So certainly we see not only the linguistic evidence, the DNA evidence, other cultural evidence, we also see martial arts evidence that we can trace directly to Nubia and Nekin, which is in southern Egypt or upper Egypt, that proves that it was
Yeah, I was just going to say the areas that he conquered.
it was black African kind of powwows, kind of meetings of great martial arts minds that set the stage for Egypt to be united by black Africans. Now, for me to say this is simply telling the truth. For them to avoid this, to downplay it, and to fabricate evidence to cover it up, now that is racism. How much more racist is it to deny someone their culture, to lie about their history in order to keep them down and justify doing eugenics on them, than it is, say, to call someone a name?
There's no comparison to that. It's just it's absolute. It's disgusting.
All right.
To think,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to think that you have to suffer this kind of this. It's almost like you're a warrior. You are a warrior. You're a true leader. I think you're extremely informed, and you'd be a really great influence to young people and anyone who's unfamiliar with this. It's really important that people understand where you're coming from by doing their own research as well, because it makes so much sense what you're saying.
Yes, and I think it's rather unfortunate that people who are paid by the corporate elite, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Stanford, study for the Center for the Advanced Study of Behavioral Sciences and so on, they're on the take, basically. They're on the corporate take. They are hell bent. They are fanatically trying to get me to fall in line, quote unquote, to put a man who was given a place by God, given a skill set by God. I mean, think about it, As much as I hate to talk about this, the son of two doctors. One's a brain surgeon. Obviously, I'm surgical with my strikes. As precise as I am fast. I would take down the next best martial artist in a fraction of a second. He would be dead. I'd be on to the next person. Okay, so when you look at leadership qualities, number one, I don't think anyone is more morally upright in America than I am. And even if I was a complete idiot, the fact that they're sellouts and I am morally sound means that I am far more qualified to lead than they are. And with the right...
Yeah, but,
Go ahead.
yeah, but what's really important that I think your viewers and people who are listening to this should realise is that you dedicate more than half your life, you know, learning and understanding and speaking about these topics and being, working really hard. It's not something you've just done right a couple of years ago, because you have to realise, you don't want your audience to think that your challenge is just, even though it's 3 years old, well, it'll be 3 years in December, that, prior to that, you weren't doing anything unless they see your videos. But it's equally important to let them know that you're doing this for like 20 odd years, for most of your life, even longer. And that proves that that takes a certain type of patience, a certain type of stamina. And you can't, it's not, nobody could actually sort of say, right, okay, I can do this as well. You have to literally dedicate all your life to this, which you've done.
Yes, and also the challenge ends December 20th. We are already past the 4.5 year mark from the first challenge, which was May 4th, I believe, 2012.
That's right. Well, yeah.
So these people have been aware that I've been trying to take my rightful place. And going back to August, I think 31st, 2009, the first video was called Illuminati Part 1, Ancient Egyptian Wisdom Collected by Ancient Eurocentrics. And the original post on my Platinum Local channel received over 10,000 views. And the latest
Wow.
one has, I think, I don't know where it's at right now. It's probably about 4,000 views. So, for somebody that no one's ever heard of, who just came out, I was doing very well. And then they sabotaged me. And now they're using their relationship with corporate America and the media to try to say, well, no one's ever heard of you. Maybe if you people weren't selling me out to the New World Order, they would have heard of me. Maybe if you left my original channel alone, which had over 1 million views, they would have heard of me. And you people cannot drug, fume, dehydrate, sabotage, and try to cheat me out of my rightful place. I tell the truth. Would Moses have let someone else lead the Jews? No. God chose Moses. God chose Joshua. God chose me. I will never, ever lie, twist, or give half-truths or change my stance on anything. God chose me because I stand firm. Has it ever occurred to you sellouts that God didn't choose you because you're the types of cowards who don't have the heart to do what I am doing? I want you to take I want you to really think about that. Any final thoughts?
Yeah. I was just going to say that, I just think that, if there's any humanity out there, people need to acknowledge, the suffering that you're going through and the persecution. And people need to wake up to your messages and take notice and sort of, listen to you and support you.
All right. So this is a pretty long interview, so I'm going to end it there. Thanks for the interview. Oh, yeah, one more thing. I haven't said this for a while. In all your interviews, you're telling the truth. And if you change your view later, you're lying then and not now. Correct?
All right, Jen.
All right. Thank you.